Welcome to part 2 of the Introduction to Pharmacy Ethics lecture. In this lecture, we're now going to look at the General Pharmaceutical Council standards for pharmacy professionals and apply them to an ethical dilemma. We'll also just look at the 4 principles of Beecham and Childress, and we'll look at the ethical decision-making framework and apply that to an ethical dilemma. So the ethical schools or theories give us different ways to think about ethical problems. This year we're going to focus on deontology. You can see in this diagram part 1 pointing towards deontology. And specifically within deontology, we will look at the 4 bioethical principles as examples of how to come to a decision about an ethical problem. So the 4 bioethical principles are non-maleficence, beneficence, autonomy, and justice. The overarching branch of ethics that this falls under is, as you can see, named here, normative ethics. So normative ethics is the study of ethical behaviour. It involves arriving at moral standards that regulate right and wrong conduct. So a classic example of this is to do to others what we would want others to do to us. And just looking at all of the normative schools or theories as per the previous diagram. Deontology, the theory of deontology is actions are performed out of duty or moral obligation. The theory of consequence is that actions are right or wrong according to the balance of their good or bad consequences. Virtue places value on the moral character of the actor rather than the acts or outcomes of acts. And context ethics appeal to the context of action to determine what should be done. So, for instance, in case-based reasoning. So this year we're going to focus on deontology. Next year we'll look at consequence, and in the third year we look at virtue. So just looking at the word deontology briefly, it has a Greek root. Deon means duty, and so deontology relates to an action that someone feels they must do due to duty or moral obligation. You could say, I need to do this as it's the right thing to do. Interestingly, with deontology, consequences are thought to be irrelevant. So there's the significant difference between deontology and consequence theory, which we'll look at next year. So deontology is associated with Immanuel Kant, a 18th century philosopher who some of you may have heard of. And deontology uses rules to determine what should be done. As I mentioned previously, consequences are thought to be irrelevant. So we're not thinking about what the outcome of the decision is, but only whether the decision is right or wrong. One's duties are determined by maxims, such as the maxim, first do no harm, which is common to all healthcare professionals, really. Duties may also be determined by principles, rules, etc. So healthcare professionals have a duty of care, and we provide patient-centred care. So thinking about the standards for pharmacy professionals, duty of care kind of fits with providing patient-centred care within the standards. Here we have another video giving a general description of deontology, and again, if you wish to read the static text, you can follow the link at the bottom of the slide. So now we're going to move on to the four principles of Beecham and Childress, two philosophers from the 20th century. These four principles are widely accepted in the biomedical field, and they're sometimes described as the four biomedical ethical principles. And they are non-maleficence, beneficence, autonomy, and justice. So we'll look at what these things mean, the principles mean, first of all. So non-maleficence is basically saying that we must do no harm. Maleficence is the act of committing harm or evil, so you can see that non-maleficence is the opposite of that. Non-maleficence includes both acts and omissions. So acts and omissions includes things that people do and what they don't do. So acts are things that people do and omissions what they don't do. Remember, sometimes doing nothing can also cause harm. The doctrine of acts and omissions is demonstrated by the difference between the act of deliberately killing someone and failing to prevent someone's death by not doing something, such as the omission of not feeding them if you are responsible for their food. So, and non-maleficence similarly can include withholding or withdrawing treatment that harms patients. Beneficence is an act of kindness or doing good to others, and it includes moral obligation. So beneficence is about promoting the well-being of others, and in our case that would be benefiting the patient. It encompasses medical paternalism. So medical paternalism is when healthcare professions make decisions for a patient for their benefit and not really giving the patient choices. Beneficence may include acting without consent or overriding a person's wishes, wants or actions in order to benefit the patient or to prevent harm. In relation to pharmacy, we can think about how all medicines have side effects, which can be seen as doing harm, but not taking a medicine may lead to worsening of illness or death. So in that case, how do you decide what is best? Moving on to the third and fourth principles, respect for autonomy. This is about the right of a competent adult to make informed decisions, including to refuse treatment, even if it is life-saving. Self-determination, so patients or individuals being able to make their own decisions. Within respect for autonomy, an individual's actions ought to be the result of his or her own choices, and they need to be given the freedom to act independently. In order to facilitate autonomy, it's important we ensure a patient is well informed and understands their options. An important part of our role as pharmacists with respect to medicines is ensuring that patients are fully informed about their medicines and the choices of medicines they could have. They're aware of any potential side effects, etc. So they're able to make a fully informed decision about whether to take treatment or not. And looking at justice, as the title suggests, this is about fairness. So looking at things like distribution of healthcare resources, that may be goods and or services. Justice is about treating similar cases in similar ways, and having the same respect for all patients, whatever the circumstances, whatever the different circumstances of each individual. So in terms of there being four principles, different principles apply in different circumstances. So not every principle applies in every circumstance. No one principle is more important than any of the others. although they can be weighed differently in different circumstances. And ethical decision making usually involves at least one of the 4 basic principles. So it's good to be familiar with their names and their definitions. So what issues are there with applying the 4 principles? You need to determine which principle or principles apply in the case, because as mentioned before, every principle does not apply in every circumstance. You need to interpret the principles for a given context, and you need to weigh the different principles against each other, especially when principles may conflict. It's important to remember that in ethics, there's not always a right and wrong choice. It's thinking about why you've made a choice, what your justification is, that is important. So I'm sure you've seen these already this term, but it's important for you to be very familiar with the standards for pharmacy professionals. So here we go again. And you'll remember that pharmacy professionals must provide person-centred care, work in partnership with others, communicate effectively, maintain, develop and use their professional knowledge and skills, use professional judgment, behave in a professional manner, respect and maintain confidentiality and privacy, speak up when they have concerns or when things go wrong, and demonstrate leadership. And we've already mentioned in this lecture and mentioned person-centred care. Remember, these standards apply to you as students as well. So here we're going to take a look for the first time at the ethical decision-making framework, and we'll be using this throughout the next 3 years of ethics, so good to get familiar with it now. This framework gives you a structure to guide you in thinking about an ethical problem, and we'll be using it in the workshop. So do make sure that you are familiar with it and using it when you're doing your work in the workshop. So first of all, when you've got an ethical dilemma that you need to make a decision about, you need to determine what the facts of the dilemma are. That will then help you to define what the ethical issue is. You need to analyse the problem. So in doing this, identify the principles that apply and any rules and values that apply as well. Then you'll be able to develop and evaluate solutions to the problem. There are often several possible solutions, and you can use the principles of non-maleficence, beneficence, autonomy and justice to help you analyse them. For instance, you can ask yourself the question, will this solution cause harm? Will it benefit the patient? Does it allow the patient to be autonomous? Is it fair to all parties involved? Then you'll be able to make your decision based on that evaluation of the solutions, and then you carry it out or you act. And then number 7, as with everything we do as a healthcare professional, we should assess the outcome and reflect. So reflect on the decision, the outcome, our actions and practice in order to help us develop and ensure we are doing the best we can. So once the decision has been carried out and you know the outcome, assess it and reflect upon whether your decision was the best one, and if you would make the same or a different choice if you came across the same or similar problem in the future. Always remember as well to use the standards of pharmacy professionals to ensure you are fulfilling your professional obligations. Okay, so that's the end of this introductory lecture. Further reading is listed here. So you've got the standards of pharmacy professionals, the link to that, pharmacy ethics and decision making, law and ethics in pharmacy practice, and Dale and Appleby's Pharmacy and Medicines Law. And those are all relevant books to ethics within the pharmacy programme. The videos shown in this lecture are from this link at the bottom of the slide, and there are more videos and explanations of the things that we've discussed in this lecture, so do take a look at that if you're interested in some more videos. So we just end on a little funny slide for you, and make sure you do your preparation work for the workshop before you attend the workshop that is coming up. Thank you.